My name is Gabriel Gonzalez. I am with Next System Studies here at Mason. I do a lot of the background organizing work and also do communications and social media and stuff like that.
And I'm Ben Manskim, Director of Next System Studies at George Mason University and Assistant Professor of Sociology here.
Yeah. And what just happened here today? What's going on here this weekend?
Well, this was the Democratizing NOVA Summit. It was a gathering of people who came together from all over Northern Virginia and also from DC, other parts of the DMV, and a few people who came in from other parts of the country to take on the question of building a Northern Virginia that works for everybody who lives here, a Northern Virginia that is owned by and accountable to the people who live here. What happened today was there were some talks, there were some discussions, there was a lot of people getting to know each other, getting to meet each other to find out what kinds of opportunities and assets and challenges people either have that they're bringing or that they're facing, and also a real focus on practical examples of work that's happening here in this region right now to build things like worker ownership in the form of worker cooperatives or projects to build community wealth and to close the racial wealth gap and the massive inequality that exists in this region by making sure that value, that economic value, that wealth stays in the communities that are generating it. People are working to build real democracy in our political system too. So people are talking about the economic sphere, they're talking about politics, they're talking about culture, law, land, you name it. And it's just been very positive because there's just a lot of willingness to work together, a desire, a thirst for that. And so you're seeing a lot of connections getting made here and connections also that came into this summit that have gotten strengthened. And I think that will continue. This is a gathering that's part of a larger process. So I think this gathering is proving to be very successful and very exciting for the people who are here.
There isn't much to add. He kind of went over it all, but what I will say is that it was very exciting as an observer, as a participant, to hear people talk and share their experiences, and also the hopefulness that they had. It's not something you find that often these days. And it was very contagious, and I was really happy to be here.
And speaking of these days, why is it important to be doing this right now?
Yeah, I don't know how political I can get, but I will say that at least in higher ed, the university, there is a very clear attack on what we can and can't study, what we can and can't say, what we can and can't even think. And many people here aren't having it. And it's also not even just faculty, staff, it's dining hall workers. It's also people who have family who work here or have family who study here. They have real concerns about what's happening to the freedom of expression and the objectivity that the university offers.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. Yeah, and there was kind of a climate of fear at GMU that was building even before the new administration took office in Washington. And there was a lot of self-censorship, and that went on at all levels of the university. And what we've started to see here, as well as in many other institutions around the country in the last weeks, is, as you said, that people have just decided that, if you're dealing with a situation in which the very existence of higher education is under attack, you really don't have any alternative but to do your job. And your job at a public university is to be courageous and going out and trying to find the truth and trying to find out the truth for yourself, but also for the public, and be courageous in terms of protecting members of your community who are being taken off the street, whose visas are being taken away. These are our students, these are our family members, these are our neighbors here in Northern Virginia. So there has been a palpable shift of mentality here, but also I'll tell you, I'm in touch with people in institutions of higher education all across the country, and that's been noteworthy. for the work that we've been doing with democratizing NOVA and with next system studies more broadly, we never really slowed down. But it makes a difference to our work if our colleagues and if our classmates and neighbors are feeling like they're just going to step forward and not be cowed anymore, because it means there are more people who are willing to make sure that the university does carry out its mission. And just to say something about that, for us in Next System Studies, we believe that universities and colleges have obligations to the people, and that our duty is to help society to find a way through periods in which our society is going through crisis, when the system is in crisis. And clearly, our system is in crisis. It's been a building crisis over a long time. So what that means is that we do take sides. Now, the sides are not partisan sides. They are not, sides that are tribalistic or anything like that. They're the side of universalism. They're the side of democracy. They're the side of social justice. Fairness is another word for that. Just being, fair and treating people equally. And that is a side. And it's, and it's possible for academics to just duck and play to power and follow the money. It's also possible, and I think more common in my experience, for people in universities to look out for their students, to seek the truth, and to do as much as they can to assist people in the communities that we serve. So that's been important for us. I think that change in mentality and momentum, because we need more people at institutions of higher education to be involved.
And then zooming out, can you talk a little bit more about Next System, what that means? Why is it important right now?
Next System Studies, Ben and I talked about this recently, so it's a relevant topic for us, is that it's a study of the crises of our time, of our system. So, climate change, military-industrial complex, etc. Innumerable lists. But it's also a study of the responses to those crises. So, it's Black Lives Matter in 2012, 2016, 2020. It's all sorts of different ways people have responded to the collapse of our system. But it's also a study of alternatives that people are creating. These small little experiments of creativity from working class people who are just trying to find ways to survive in ways that are actually very useful for everybody as a whole. Because they're being very innovative and we're not noticing. So I think that's a key part of Next System Studies.
Yeah, and it's important to recognize, and it's sort of implicit in what you were saying, that there's Next System Studies, which is this field of study that we've been working to build in the university, and then there are people who are doing Next System work of various kinds, and most of them don't use the framework of Next System, so to speak, although some do, but they're doing all kinds of work that you were referring to there, Gabriel, in terms of building, not only individual worker or consumer or community cooperatives, but systems of cooperatives, systems that also may involve other kinds of practices and organizations, like sort of partnerships, as Anthony Cook was saying earlier, between the public and the private sector that are driven by the social sector, right? So there's all kinds of examples across the United States, from Cleveland to Jackson to my home state of Wisconsin, and also here in Northern Virginia, where people have been building systems that could, if they were knitted together, provide an alternative world system, something else, a different kind of logic, a different set of rules for how we all live together, right? So there would be no Next System Studies if there weren't actually Next System work that has been happening in the world today. And I think that's used the word hope earlier, and the hope comes from the fact that that work is actually advancing, that there are more and more places where people are, for example, insisting that public monies should be voted on and allocated by the public, so that's participatory budgeting, and that's happening in more and more cities and regions across the United States and all over the world, where people are saying that the people who work at a particular job site, are the ones who should actually be making the decisions and who should like recoup the value of our labor, right? So that's a worker co-op, right? And there are more. The worker co-op segment of the broader cooperative sector in the United States is growing, and then the good news is that the things that are growing are not growing sort of in a vacuum, and they're not growing. They didn't just sort of land in the United States out of history, but actually they're based in the history of this country. And so there's been many layers of democratic alternatives that are, in some parts of this country, in many parts of this country, just fundamental to what it is to be an American, right? So things like the town hall meeting going back to before the American Revolution, things like agricultural cooperatives and electricity cooperatives in rural America, things like public libraries, which were a next system reform. We didn't used to have public sewage treatment, public transportation, public libraries, public education. Those were all major systemic changes that prior movements fought for. So the things that are happening now are actually building off of these prior major structural reforms, systemic reforms in our system. But we may be in the period right now where the kinds of initiatives that have been emerging in the last generation that really have to do with changing the way our economy is organized, that may be sort of the final step in a way, if we want a different kind of system overall. One which is, people use the word social in terms of the solidarity economy, but one in which the basis for how we organize the economy is around being nice to each other. Basically, that's what the word social means. It's, it actually comes from, the idea of friendship, right? So we build our economic system and our political system around helping each other out, looking out for one another, and that's promising. And it also feels very necessary. That we were talking earlier about higher education, what higher education is facing right now, but our entire society is at this point. We're at a turning point in which things could either get a lot scarier and a lot worse. And I think a lot of people feel that, which is why you've seen millions of people on the streets, and you're going to see millions more this coming week here in the beginning of May. But also, it's a point at which it's possible that we could transition to the society which a world that has incredible wealth can actually support. We now have the capacity on this planet to feed everybody, for everybody to have quality, healthcare, and to have a home, and to have access to education, and to do work that it contributes to the community. We have that capacity, and that wasn't true 100, 200 years ago. So we are at this juncture, and so in terms of next system studies, right? Our question is, how can the university help society with that process? And DNOVA is part of how we think the universities can help, by bringing people together, by providing some stability, right? Because we're around a little bit longer than a lot of people in communities are. It just depends on who they are. But by having the opportunity to see different parts and different opportunities, because we're talking to different people, and to analyze what they're doing, to actually subject the work that they're doing to empirical analysis and help people to see what seems to be working and what isn't. And to also, bring people who are students into engagement with people in the community, to lend a hand, to learn, to actually go back into the community after they leave, and to build up the power of people in the community and the community's wealth. As people like Gabriel who grew up here, right?
So if people wanted to plug in and learn more, or get involved, or do something, or find something in their own place, like, where would you encourage them to go?
Well, there's two websites we have. There's nextsystem.gmu.edu that has more of the stuff we're doing here locally in Northern Virginia, surrounding the university. And then there's also nextsystem.org, which is a slightly more international project focused on a different set of goals. Either of those have a lot of information if you want to learn more. We have an Instagram, Next System Studies. We have a Facebook, Next System Studies. Yeah.
Yeah, and that latter website you mentioned, nextsystem.org, is it will connect people to a lot of different opportunities and a lot of partners, but it also, in the immediate term, is being used to promote something called the Next System Teach-ins. And so that is something that people definitely can get involved with. So you just go there, register, you'll get updates. And then in November of this year, there will be these teach-ins that will take place all around the world. It could be dozens of sites, it could be hundreds. It just depends on how many people and how many places decide that they're going to organize a teach-in. But basically a teach-in is like a whole gathering, a set of learning opportunities and exchanges that take place at a university campus or a college campus or in a community center or a union hall or a church, but where people come together, they go in rather than going out, and they take on a particular question. So the history of teach-ins, throughout history, it started with the teach-ins on the war in Vietnam. Then it was what became Earth Day. That was a teach-in in 1970. The women's movement used teach-ins in the 1970s. There were the teach-ins on apartheid. In the 1990s, there were the teach-ins on corporate power, which were called the democracy teach-ins. It had a profound effect and actually was involved with organizing those. So the Next System teach-ins are basically bringing it together in lots of places around the world in large numbers to learn from each other and to take on the critical questions of the day. And that has to do with, all right, well, how do we understand the crises of the time? What can we learn from people who are dealing with it? What are the alternatives that they've been building? What can we learn about those? What do we think the different ways that we could actually get to a better next system might be? And so that's the next step in the process for us. And so people are certainly invited to get in that loop as well. Yeah.
Last question. What personally motivates you to do this work?
I mean, I saw it here today, actually, not to be too corny or anything, but I have as one of the central figures in my life my mom, who is an immigrant. She came here in the 90s from Bolivia, and I remember being a young 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and she would take me to work with her, and I would just watch, because as a kid I couldn't work, but I would just watch her. I'd watch her coworkers, who were also mostly immigrant women, and I'd watch people. She worked at a thrift store. I'd watch the people who would shop there. Yeah. And I was always, even now and as a kid, just so taken by the fact that everybody that I've ever encountered is living their own lives and all struggling in some way, shape, or form. And that each of those struggles are actually kind of unified in some way. And every time they interact, I would watch them interact and be like, they're talking about it, but not really so explicitly. And I just really enjoy that. And in here at the summit, there are a lot of very inspiring women here who I think is not even rare to find in these spaces, these like more progressive spaces, women of color. And it was a very strong expression of, I think, the best of society has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
I find that inspiring and motivating. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Gabriel. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been at this for a long time, and when I say at this, the work of social change. And so I have origin stories. In some ways, they're similar, working with my mom's mom in the soup kitchen that she ran in her church, and we're helping her set up some of the first community gardens in her neighborhood, and going and doing recycling and other things. She was a school teacher and a single mother, and was involved with the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, and so there are a lot of things. So she was an inspiration, and there were others in my family, many others, and other experiences, and a lot of things going back to when I was a kid. So I've been at this for a long time. So for me, it's that at this point, having already crossed that line even when I was a child between, that line of being involved and being a bystander. I was like, I'm involved. Even as a child, I just never stopped being involved after that. Maybe it wasn't even a choice that I had in a way. That I know literally tens of thousands of people personally, all across this country, and thousands of people internationally who are working to make the world a better place. And they're brilliant and compassionate people, and they teach me a lot. And so I've learned a lot today. I learned so much every day that I'm involved with this work, especially today. And that keeps me going, to be honest with you. So a lot of times people in social movements will talk about the value of solidarity as a principle, which is, an injury to one is an injury to all, right? As the people say in the labor movement. And that's an important kind of solidarity, sort of this idea that, I'm going to stand up for you because I know you're going to stand up for me, and we're in it together. But I think there's also that solidarity that comes from the feeling of just being in a movement together with other people who are motivated by compassion and by empathy. And that is, in some ways, a more powerful form of solidarity.
Anything else you want to share?
So I would just say that anybody who's watching this who hasn't reached out to us, who is thinking that there may be some information that we can provide or connections that we can make, or that maybe that they just want to let us know that you're doing something similar wherever you are, please do reach out to us. And I just want to encourage people to organize, and reorganize the work they're doing in universities and in communities, to be thinking not only about sort of resisting the harms that they're facing, and not only to be thinking about advocating on particular issues, but also be taking on the system question of how we can go about together developing strategies and putting them into practice for creating a system that doesn't produce all these harms in the first place. So please reach out to us.
Wonderful, you guys. And I think, Ryan?
Yep, Shiny.